We know in medicine that AI is incredibly powerful if you have structured data. So, digital pathology, where you're looking at a high resolution scan for patterns, digital radiology, digital endoscopy. These are areas where AI is very helpful. When it comes to the diagnosis of diseases, AI can replicate the opinion of experts.
Professor David Whitcomb, warm welcome to the Scope Forward show. I'm so glad that we're speaking. You're the co-founder and chief scientific officer for Ariel Precision Medicine. I'm really looking forward to learning a lot more about how you started the company and what the company does. But once again, a very, very warm welcome to the Scope Forward show.
Thank you so much for having me.
As we get started, Professor Whitcomb, let me start by introducing you. I have a AI agent to do that. So let me just play that for you.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a moment to appreciate the remarkable career of Professor Emeritus David C. Whitcomb, MD, PhD. A distinguished physician-scientist, he earned his MD and PhD from The Ohio State University, followed by clinical and postdoctoral training at Duke University. His academic journey led him to the University of Pittsburgh and UPMC, where he served as Division Chief of Gastroenterology, Hepatology, and Nutrition from 1999 to 2016. Renowned as the father of pancreatic genetics, Professor Whitcomb's groundbreaking discovery of the trypsin gene mutation's role in hereditary pancreatitis has reshaped our understanding of pancreatic diseases. His research has been pivotal in integrating genetic variants into complex models of specialized cells and systems. After retiring, Professor Whitcomb co-founded Ariel Precision Medicine in 2015, focusing on the practical application of new insights for practicing physicians. He has been instrumental in developing SNAPishot, a suite of precision medicine tools, revolutionizing personalized medicine and offering new possibilities for diagnosis and treatment. Professor Whitcomb's career is a testament to the power of dedicated research and innovation in advancing healthcare. His contributions continue to have a profound impact on the medical field.
Well, that was pretty amazing. And that looks like it's going to be one of my best friends in the future.
His best friend, but I think Jenny is her name, the digital assistant. So she did a fantastic job of laying the ground of all your accomplishments, and it's an honor to have you on the show. I want to start with the very basics, and I'm going to keep it simple. I want to ask you first, what is precision medicine?
So precision medicine is a concept. And what you've just asked is a very important and controversial question. It's a concept that recognizes a failure in modern Western medicine where it's sort of a one-size-fits-all approach. The concept of precision medicine is to give the right medicine in the right dose to the right patient for the right disease at the right time to have a better outcome and save money. Everyone is in favor of it. The other concept behind precision medicine is that the reason there needs to be a personalization is every person is different, and it's largely due to their genetic makeup that is modified by age and environmental factors and habits and those types of things. But the genetics that physicians were taught in medical school is traditional Mendelian genetics, where one genetic factor that runs through the family causes a complex disease. And we know that's only true in about 1 to 2% of patients that have a syndrome, which is a disease that's defined by a combination of signs and symptoms, but it doesn't tell you what's wrong or how to fix it. So the concept of precision medicine is, how do we take this information and sort it out so that we can personalize the care with an early diagnosis of what the disease is and what it is not, to make a diagnosis using biomarkers to predict if it's going to be a mild or severe course, to choose a medication and to make sure the medication actually is going to work and help the patient and is not going to harm them. So we all agree that that's what is needed. But the problem is, how do you put this revolutionary idea into action? And in my view, which I believe is the correct view because it actually works, is we need a new paradigm for medicine, which is different than the old paradigm that we were trained in, which is based on the germ theory of disease, where one factor causes a complex disorder and that you can figure it out by taking a population and splitting it into people with and without the disease and identifying the one factor that distinguishes the two. That's how we were trained. But if you get into the complexity of the human body and a human genome that's, over 1 billion base pairs long with millions of variations, it gets a little difficult and actually doesn't work. We have to use a new approach. That's my definition of precision medicine. It's a concept, but reducing it into action has been incredibly challenging. And I don't think many people have been able to even understand it, let alone solve it.
What you just said triggered a whole lot of questions, but I want to once again start with the very basics. So going back to the history of medicine, when did the science or the industry come up with the whole concept of precision medicine? How many years has it been?
I think that some of the concepts came up in the early 80s where cancer, you need to have both an injury and then something that accelerates it. You need at least two things for a cancer develops. You have to have the risk factor, an injury, and then a driver. But we also know that in the medicine that we were taught, the observations are that for many infectious disease, there are some people that have the infectious agents but have no signs of disease, and other people that have what looks like the disease, but you can't find the agent. So with our definition of diseases being a combination of signs and symptoms, we knew there was some variability. We knew that there were outliers, and we just didn't understand why. But historically, it's quite interesting to see how we got to where we are. It turned out in the 1800s in the United States, there was like 30 different kinds of medicine, from traditional medicine, from Hippocrates, dogmatic medicine, holistic medicine, Indian herbal medicine, voodoo, osteopathic medicine, chiropractic medicine, and something called snake oil. Snake oil was actually an oil that had capsaicin and other things in it. It was said to come from rattlesnakes, and if you used it, you could be cured of all kinds of things. That's kind of been poster child for how crazy medicine was. So a group of physicians in New York City got together and they determined that medicine was a mess and it should be based on three fundamental principles: science, education, and ethics, because none of them were present in many forms of medicine. So in the 1800s, there was some tremendous progress that was made in understanding medicine. One of them was the invention of the compound microscope, where you could see cells and you could define pathology, and you could see these little foreign objects in tissue that was damaged that were called germs. So they started a medical school and nobody came. Why would you spend 4 years and a lot of money to go through this allopathic medical school when you can go down the street to a compounding pharmacy and get your MD in 3 months at no expense and become a doctor? So they decided that we need a political solution. So around turn of the century, early 1900s, they hired a man by the name of Abraham Flexner, and they got a grant from the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Education. And what they did is they had Flexner go through, build out the criteria for education and also the scientific method. How do you detect germs? And how do you do case control studies? And it's called the scientific method. And the Flexner report says, this is what science is, this is what education is, and this is what the state of education in the United States and Canada is. It's awful. Physicians cannot control themselves, and therefore the government must take over. And what they must do is every state should develop a licensing program. So in addition to a medical degree, you have to have a license to practice medicine. So fast forward 110 years, and guess what the medical schools do now? They send their curriculum into the state legislature to see if it is compliant with a 1910 report. The curriculum is rigid. You can't believe this, but that's true. And so all physicians are being taught based on principles that were in the 1800s, And the new ideas and the new concepts that have been developed since then are stifled because they don't fit into that paradigm. So that's the paradigm we have. That's why it's been impossible to really move precision medicine forward, and why physicians who spent so much time and energy being trained in the germ theory of disease and evidence-based medicine, which how can anybody say we're against evidence-based medicine? Well, it's a case control study that's based on old ideas that were done with inappropriate methods, and you use meta-analysis to see if there's any consistency there, but it doesn't really tell you what the underlying problem is or how to fix it on a case-by-case basis. That's the problem we have in medicine.
Amazing. That gives so much of foundation and ground to understand what you've built with Ariel Precision Medicine. But before I ask you what the company does, I just want a quick answer on, if the holy grail of precision medicine is, let's say, a 10, where is the world right now on a scale of 1 to 10?
I would say it's at about a 2 to 3. There are some areas, like in cancer, there's a precision oncology, but that's really looking at the genome of the tumor, not the patient. And there are some other areas like that where there is some progress that's being made. And I think that the concept is now people are more comfortable with it. They just don't know how to apply it, especially physicians. They hate genetics, and insurance companies don't pay for it because the physicians that are advising the insurance companies say it's worthless. So it's been a real problem.
Very interesting. So Dave, please share a little bit more about Ariel Precision Medicine. How did you come about it, and what does the company do?
When I finished my training at Duke University and came to the University of Pittsburgh, I got a position at the VA, and I wanted to crack the code on pancreatitis, chronic pancreatitis especially, because I had seen a couple patients at Duke University with chronic pancreatitis, and my mentor said, they're alcoholics. I said, these old ladies aren't alcoholics. They said, don't you know how to take a history? And I said, yes, I do. They're conservative Baptists. They don't drink and they don't lie. They have advanced chronic pancreatitis. Both of them do. They've been all over the place trying to get help. They've come here as a last resort. It's got to be something other than alcohol. And they said, nope, that's the only thing that causes it. And I said, is anybody working on this scientifically? And my mentor said, it is a hopeless condition. The organ is destroyed before you can figure out what's going on with it. And it's a hopeless condition. I said, well, that's crazy. Somebody has to work on it. He said, don't throw your career away. Go into hepatology where you can get biopsies. And I said, okay, thank you. And I went back and I talked to those ladies and I said, nobody knows what you have and there's nobody working on it. I was told it is a hopeless condition, but a hopeless condition needs a champion. And I'm determining right now that I will be the champion to lead insights into chronic pancreatitis. And I've kept my promise. I found that's the way to go. So when I got to Pittsburgh and I got 100 consecutive patients, I found out they were all different. There was nothing similar about them. So I reasoned it probably had to be something genetic, at least that would give us an insight. And so that's where I contacted a couple friends because we were sort of banned from the pancreas community because we weren't surgeons. We started the Midwest Multi-Center Pancreatic Study Group for 4 of us to kind of work together and help each other. And I chose hereditary pancreatitis. And Larry Gates, a friend of mine that was in Lexington, Kentucky, found a family, and we did the genetics on it and found out it was indeed genetic. It was key that really unlocked the whole series of problems associated with it. And then recognizing that even people that had the worst gene had a huge spectrum of disease. Some of them never got the disease. Others got them when they were babies. Some got fibrosis. Others got diabetes. Some got cancer, and so we were able to really crack the code beginning with that.
When was that? Which year was this?
We started the Midwest Multi-Center Pancreatic Study Group in 1992, I believe. We found the family in 1994 and published the first paper in 1996, and that was the breakthrough.
And what prompted you to start Ariel Precision Medicine?
So I started a study called the North American Pancreatitis Study, where I got 30 friends to help deeply phenotype patients with pancreatitis, but I had them do it in a mechanistic way. So it looked like an epidemiology study with a bunch of extra questions, but it was really mechanistic. And we were able to use that to find out what the average person does, who has a genetic cause, who has other things, what are the combinations of factors, how do they work together, all that kind of stuff. The problem is that we couldn't actually implement it. And just because the way the system is, the insurance companies won't pay for it. Other companies quickly started offering it, but they couldn't provide an interpretation. They didn't understand the physiology and pathobiology behind it. The informatics systems at the hospital wouldn't allow you to mess with electronic health records. There were so many barriers, and I found that even as division chief, I could not break through all the barriers because people were making money and they didn't want to change. And other people, the physicians were especially resistant to genetics just because it's very, very complicated. So we started Ariel Precision Medicine in order to provide clinical decision support because the doctors don't want to know what the genetics are. They just want to know what to do. They want to have a recognition that there's rationale behind it, and they'll dig deep on cases as a quality check and just to convince themselves. They just want to know what to do or what an expert would do. And so what Ariel is able to do is to integrate all the information a priori and give the physicians specific information. And we did some deep sequencing, but the problem was it just could not be reimbursed. And so in January of this year, I flipped the entire script for Ariel Precision Medicine. And that really was revolutionary. What we did was instead of doing a deep dive, which takes a lot of experts to look at variants you've never seen before, and then we said, why don't we just take the genetic variants we do know how to interpret, put them on a SNP array with 800,000 other variants that other people have identified in other diseases, and we'll group it together and we will do the genotyping on individuals with more than 800,000 single nucleotide polymorphisms, SNP. We'll put it in the cloud after it has been technically validated, but we don't report it to the patient until it has been clinically interpreted. If it's in the cloud, the time it takes to pull out a subset of 100 SNPs and integrate them into a mechanistic machine model, simulate what would happen, and provide an outcome is a couple seconds. You don't have to wait forever. It's just really fast. We also found that all the pharmacogenetic genes were on there, so we can identify every drug that the U.S. Food and Drug Administration recognizes has a big difference in how different people metabolize it. And sometimes it doesn't work and other people are toxic. Well, we can predict that. We know who it is. That information is on there. So we can provide that information. And we have a phone app so a person can tell immediately if they're given a recommendation for a drug, whether or not it's likely to help or if it's likely to be toxic. So that's available immediately. The limitation is that we can know, based on my experience and all the information we have, what's going to happen with a patient, but the company cannot tell the doctor what to do. It's against the law. We'd be sued for malpractice if, we step outside of narrow guidelines. So I started a publishing company called Systems Modeling and Advanced Report Technology for Medical Decisions. The acronym is SMART-MD, a publishing company and a journal within it that is called the SmartMD Journal of Precision Medicine. And the reason I did this is that if you tell a doctor that a patient has a certain genetic variant, for them to go through the literature and try to figure out what the heck that means, and you have conflicting information, it depends on which population you looked at and what question was being asked and blah, 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 blah. All they want to know is that if an expert that really understood this was able to make a clinical decision, what would they do? So you have the regular journal, you have a machine readable version, and then we have a resource page. So we've built an entire infrastructure to allow us to take syndromes, which is a combination of signs and symptoms, and understand what are all the diseases that are like that, identify the one that's most likely to be it because there are genetic defects in one system and there's not defects in the other system. How do you verify it? What are the treatments? How do you make sure they're safe and build that out immediately?
Very, very impressive. And I do want to get to the operational model and a few business questions. But before that, I want to ask you, so how accurate is the output that comes? And what is the distance that needs to be covered from where the science is right now?
First of all, it's a screening tool. And so what it's designed to do is to screen through things that we already know. The other thing we know is there's a lot we don't know. And so we're saying there are probably some rare genetic variants that are not on the array that could be causing the disease, and we won't detect it. But what it does is at least gives the doctor a direction and a priority. And we know that this type of genotyping is about 97 to 99% accurate. So it's not 100% accurate. If something's critical, you have to go and do the DNA sequencing to verify it. So we recognize that as well. The other issue is the use of artificial intelligence in order to help make a decision. We do not use artificial intelligence. And there are three reasons for that. The first one is that FDA has very specific criteria for artificial intelligence because you don't really know how the computer came up with an association or a recommendation. It sounds really good and it's plausible, but is it true? And if you had different patients from different populations, would you come up with a different answer? And the answer is we don't know. So what Ariel does is use mathematical modeling so that every single step is explicit and we can demonstrate exactly what answer we got and show the peer-reviewed published literature and the evidences that supports that so that you can trace every step and know exactly how you came up with it. The disadvantage is that, we're lagging about 3 to 5 years behind what we know, but it's established in the medical community as being reasonable. So artificial intelligence, our concern is at least twofold for AI. Now, we know in medicine that AI is incredibly powerful if you have structured data. So digital pathology, where you're looking at a high resolution scan for patterns, digital radiology, digital endoscopy. These are areas where AI is very helpful. When it comes to the diagnosis of diseases, AI can replicate the opinion of experts. So in neurology, for example, if you took 100 neurologists and you gave them 5 cases for them to go through in detail, you get a complete spattering of all kinds of different diagnoses. You don't have any consistency. But AI can be trained so that it consistently comes up with the best guess of the experts. The problem with that is that the experts were trained 5 to 10 years ago based on published data that was an additional 5 to 10 years earlier that was based on the germ theory of disease and concepts that were even 10 to 20 years earlier than that. So it's backwards viewing, and it improves the ability to get a consensus, but you don't necessarily know why that decision was made, and it doesn't tell you about new emerging concepts for the future. So it's backwards viewing. The second major problem with it is that with our medical record system, we define diseases by syndromes, not by mechanisms. So it can't parse out the difference between the effect of mechanisms, especially if they're sequential or complex, what we call GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. And so the idea of taking IBM Watson, for example, and spending millions and millions of dollars for it to sort through electronic health records, they came up with nothing. There's a third problem with AI, and that's called hallucinations. This is where AI comes up with an answer that sounds plausible, but it's not true. And so whenever you get something, you're going, well, I better go back and test this to see it's actually true or just a random association. But if you don't know how it came up with it, it's really hard to retro engineer it and figure out where it came from. And so there's really those three problems with the AI. It needs structured data. It's retrospective in its view, and it has hallucinations.
Dave, I would have agreed completely in the pre-generative AI days, especially with structured data and all that. And even though I've not been playing in the medical domain, these other domains, it's able to figure a lot of things out quite fascinatingly with a lot of unstructured information, unstructured data. In fact, it's performing better with unstructured data more than a human built model. And it's been shockingly fascinating. And these are still early days. And again, this is not even a question, it's just I'm prompted to just react to what you just said. I'm just wondering, with the huge amount of data that the whole world is supplying, generative AI companies especially, what's going to turn up a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now?
But the problem is not unstructured data, it's bad data.
Bad data.
It's false data is the problem. And so we have to overcome that. I mean, this is why I'm working on this Journal of Precision Medicine, because I'm demanding that the authors are able to explain to me exactly what they mean, and we're put it in a way that's unequivocal. And so that way, when you pull something, you're pulling the right thing because it's tagged correctly. AI, when it does figure out something, the answers have to conform to rules of physics and of mechanisms before we can accept it as true. We have to be able to take the insights and reduce it to things that we should have recognized and we didn't. But now that we look at it and sort it out, it actually is true and we can adopt it. So that's why we do use AI all the time for hypothesis generation, but not for reporting hallucinations to patients.
So let's move forward, with some operational questions and business questions. So I'm understanding that you're targeting patients directly. So a patient could take the test from you, you're sending the report to clinicians. Is my understanding correct or no?
No, this is a medical test, so it has to be ordered by a physician, and they're responsible for the interpretation and explanation and change in treatment strategy. So they're the ones that order it. The problem is that currently the insurance doesn't pay for it, so the patient has to pay for it. But what they do get is they get a copy of the report with tools on their smartphone to access it with very simple information they can share with any doctor in an emergency room or their pharmacist, that kind of thing. So that's the way it's set up.
So the patient is getting, the report as well on their smartphone.
Yes.
The patient paying for the test, and the patient paying you or paying the physician?
They pay us.
They pay you directly, but the test has to be prescribed by a physician. By
a physician or a pharmacist or a PA, somebody in the United States with an NPI number, which is a national provider number.
And how much does the test cost?
So for the pharmacogenetics, which has just about all the genes that the FDA recommends, it's $250. For the pancreatic cancer screening test, which we're super excited about because it fills a huge gap. Who do you actually pull the fire alarm on and start searching for a hidden cancer? That's $299, and the pancreatitis test is $299. However, once you get one test, a major portion of the cost is doing the genotyping. If you've already been genotyped for the first test, you don't have to be genotyped again, so you get a discount on all future testing. Thirdly, this is a huge bargain for what we call accountable care organizations. This would be like the government, that they want their patients or they want their citizens to work and not be using the healthcare system. So a small investment will allow the patients to get the right diagnosis early, get the right medicines, get better, and get back to work where they're earning money and paying taxes. So accountable care organizations where you have a payer provider, and there's lots of examples in the United States as well. Those are ones where it is a bargain to invest in that, because it just short circuits two things. One is we call it diagnostic odyssey, where you do test after test after test, and prescription roulette, where you give a medicine, you wait to see what happens. You do another medicine, you wait to see what happens. So those are the advantages that we have. And the time that you save, getting the right treatment early, all those are very positive and do exactly what precision medicine promised, giving the right medicine at the right dose to the right patient at the right time for the right disease to make them better and to save money.
Do you also work with big pharma or the drug companies?
Yes. Absolutely. And actually, we're also developing our own medications because we get insight into what the targets are for a subset of patients. We can repurpose a medication that can be treated, but the advantage we have to ourselves and to other pharmaceutical companies is we have thousands of patients that we know mechanistically what the problem is, so that if you're choosing a group of patients to test a drug on, you're not having it diluted by a group of patients that don't actually have the problem, but they have overlapping symptoms. So it reduces the size of pharmaceutical trials, increases the power, and allows the whole process to be accelerated at a fraction of the cost. So there's a lot of excitement about what we're able to offer, and we're in negotiations to do that as well. So we do have a drug that's about ready to go into phase 2-3 trials. We also have companies that want to use our platform because they've been stymied trying to figure out how to test their medication in the right groups of patients. Most of the patients aren't at the major medical centers. The major medical centers get end-stage disasters. We want to be able to get the patients where they live with the doctors that are caring for them immediately.
I recall having this conversation with a gastroenterologist, incidentally, and if I remember correctly, it was about pancreas and pancreatitis. Point that he made, I remember, is that let's say the diagnosis is established, or you have early diagnosis. His point was, what do I do, with that diagnosis? Because there's really no specific treatment. It's going to only worry this patient for maybe decades ahead into the future. I'm curious to know what your reflection would be on something like that.
That's an area where education is going to be important. So in our pancreatitis report, you want to know if it's in the acinar cell, if it's in the duct cell, if it's likely gallstones, if it's hypertriglyceridemia, whether or not diabetes is caused by type 2 diabetes or damage to the islet cells. You want to know if the symptoms of maldigestion are overlapping with celiac disease. You want to know why they're having pain. So each of those can be broken down. The amazing thing is that for some types of pancreatic disease, if it's an acinar cell problem, you can treat them with cystic fibrosis drugs. And we're trying to bring one to the market that will markedly drop the cost by 90% so that it's actually affordable. If it's a gallstone, you take the gallbladder out. If it's alcohol related, we can detect that, because there's some genes that make you hypersensitive to alcohol and smoking. So we can reduce the progression by doing that. If they have maldigestion and celiac disease, you don't give them more pancreatic digestive enzymes. You modify their diet so that you're treating two diseases with the same symptom, both of which are common. Well, there's actually a big group in India, Asian Institute of Gastroenterology, that started using the pharmacogenetic component, and they were shocked to find that 37% of their patients had a major change in disease management based on just a couple genes. You can not only identify what the problem is, recommend treatment, but in addition, you can give them the right medication and come up with a treatment plan that helps. The second thing is that there's hope for the future, because as each of these problems, subsets of mechanistic problems are identified in this cell or that cell. Is it an oxidative stress problem? Is it a delivery problem? We can begin to isolate these patients for clinical trials to determine if we can repurpose drugs that are used for other diseases to treat this subset of disease, or is there an opportunity to come up with a new targeted drug? So Mission Cure, which is a nonprofit organization that we're very excited to work with, has an initiative out to come out with a new medicine that will target trypsin, which is the culprit. And so there's a lot of excitement about that, and they've put money on the table. What we can do is tell you which patients it's going to work in and which patients that's not even the problem. Or do they need a CFTR, cystic fibrosis gene corrector? Or do they just need their gallbladder out? Or what is it that's driving the disease? If you're looking backwards, you can say, well, when I first did this, I used another company that just gave me the genetics but didn't tell me what to do, and therefore it's useless. Well, you picked the wrong company, buddy. Why don't you pick one that can actually give you clinical decision support so that you know what to do? In most cases, some patients that have been diagnosed with chronic pancreatitis and severe maldigestion don't even have pancreatitis. They have celiac disease. They were misdiagnosed, and the problem is that once you have a diagnosis, you can't get it out of the medical record. The person's stuck with the wrong diagnosis, and more treatment doesn't help. I understand exactly what your doctor said. They had a bad experience because they did the wrong test on the wrong person with the wrong company and got gobbledygook back. And they probably advised the insurance companies that this is of no help.
Just out of curiosity, I want to ask a broad question, and it might even come through as a naive question. In your work, especially with Ariel Precision Medicine, and when you throw in epigenetics and the microbiome, so have you stumbled into newer discoveries that have led themselves to a different understanding?
Absolutely. So the beauty of the pancreas is there's 3 cell types and they each do one thing. The second interesting thing, and we know how it works. We know the mechanisms of how each of the specialized cells work and which genes are expressed and what they do. The second thing is that with pancreatitis, you know when the process starts. It starts in most cases with an episode of acute pancreatitis. Then you can follow the trajectory because you have a starting point and you got measures of what's going wrong and how fast. What it helped us do is not just understand acinar cell and duct cell and islet cell, it helped us understand variations in the inflammatory process, who has exaggerated inflammation, who has rapid fibrosis, because those have to do with the immune system. We also had tremendous insight into pain. It turns out if you look at a patient with pancreatitis and get a CAT scan and you see damage, nobody can tell you how much pain they have because the pain process is not dependent on the acinar cell or duct cell. It's dependent on how the nervous system responds to injury. And when you do the genetic analysis and look at people with pain, without pain, the first thing we found is that people that had just terrible pain they couldn't deal with had a very high level of genetics for depression and anxiety. So they had this much pain, but it felt like this and they couldn't stand it. Secondly, is that another set of genes overlapped genes associated with chronic low back pain, with chronic shoulder pain, with post-mastectomy pain, with injury, so that if a person does have pain, their body can't tamp it down. So it turns out it's a part of the brain descending inhibition. And you can do testing to verify this, something called quantitative sensory testing. So we were able to understand the nervous system. We were understand by looking at the amount of pancreatic damage and maldigestion, the intestinal system, overlapping inflammatory diseases and how the inflammatory system works. And so that cracked the code for more complex diseases such as celiac disease, inflammatory bowel disease, liver disease, other things, because now we have a handle on what are the keys to the wrong immune response, what are the keys to the wrong pain response, those kinds of things. We can sort that out. And we also know the primary cells. So that's why we have modules that we're hoping to come out with soon for fatty liver disease. Is it going to progress or not? Diarrhea with abdominal pain, all these kinds of things. Now we have models that we're going to get out. I mean, we're looking for some growth funds because I can do a lot, but I can't do all those. I need help. We need people to work in parallel rather than me working in series. So it's an incredible, exciting time. We have insight as well on cardiovascular disease, a lot of information already out there for that, dyslipidemia, cholesterol, diabetes. So the different type of diabetes, is it type 1, type 2, type 3? Is it insulin resistant? Is it a failure of the beta cell? Are they susceptible to inflammation? Should you use metformin or not? What about some of the medications? When is it going to work? When it's not going to work? All that kind of stuff you'll be see coming out of us.
Dave, as we move to the conclusion of our conversation, I want to ask you a question that I ask pretty much every guest on the show. From the lens that you're seeing, what is the future of gastroenterology? And you can expand that to all of medicine.
The current trajectory in medicine is unsustainable. There's a lot of problems with it. One is the diagnostic odyssey is very expensive. Secondly, getting medicines too late after there's a lot of damage done. Third is people that are on several medicines, a term we use called number needed to treat, NNT. And what it tells you is that if you have a diagnosis and you have a medicine, how many people do you have to treat before one person benefits? And you know what the number is? Like 6.
Okay. Wow.
Depending on the drug, it's 5 to 6 people you have to treat. So most of the people that are on multiple medicines have several medicines that are worthless. They're not actually helping the patient, but you can't figure it out. In some cases, the pharmaceutical companies have an idea of who it's going to work in and who it won't work in, but they don't want to tell anybody because they want everybody to be on the medicine as long as it doesn't harm them. So being able to empower the patient and their doctor to correctly select the right medicine that works the first time and cut their medicine usages drastically and not buy medicines and take it for 3 months to find out whether it works and find out it was of no help and it also delayed them getting the right medicine. We have the chance to really revolutionize medicine and slash the exorbitant cost of the current forms of medicine. The challenge is, and I'm not naive to this, there are entities that do not want to change. They're making a lot of money and they don't want anybody undermining their model. And so we recognize this. And my attitude is that I want to do the right thing. And there's going to be opposition. And I don't care because my purpose in life is to help as many people as possible and to leave a legacy where there will be new insights, new tools, and new opportunities that will be demanded by people that finally figure out they've been snookered, there's an alternative, and physicians who are frustrated in following old algorithms that really want to see their patients get better and have new tools as well. There's opportunity, but it is a new paradigm. It doesn't reject the old one. There's still infectious diseases and those kinds of things. But what it does is that it breaks it down into its component parts, understands which parts are not working correctly, and is there a workaround? Are there other ways of strengthening failing systems? And can we prevent the development of diseases that can never be cured?
Professor David Whitcomb, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and this has been such an insightful conversation. I'm deeply impressed with your mission, and I wish you all the best, to you and your team. Thank you so much for coming on the Scope Forward show once again.
Thank you for having me, and I appreciate what you're doing because there are a lot of innovations and people working hard. It's hard to get the message out, but your work and your platform and your vision for what the future can be is also very important. And I'm happy to work together with you, recognizing that impact can be made, and there are new ways to really help people that are desperately in need of that help.